The Hartwell family's history is shrouded in a strange and unsettling mystery that has baffled both locals and historians for generations. And the most disturbing chapter in their legacy centers on a haunting pattern that defies logic or coincidence. Every single one of the 5 wives married into the Hartwell lineage over the past century descended into madness. These women, from vastly different backgrounds, lifestyles, and upbringings, all shared the same tragic fate, as if the very act of marrying a Hartwell sealed their destiny. This eerie repetition became a subject of whispered speculation in the small town where the family's sprawling estate stood, looming mansion of gray stone and ivy that seemed to cast its own shadow over those who lived within. The first recorded instance was in the late 1800s, when Margaret, a vibrant and intelligent young woman, married Edward Hartwell. Their union began in joy, but within a year, Margaret's behavior became erratic. She would wander the halls at night, muttering to herself, and claim to hear voices coming from the walls. Doctors of the era diagnosed her with hysteria, a common and poorly understood label at the time, and she was eventually confined to a private asylum. The family never spoke of her again, and her name was quietly removed from the official records. Decades later, history repeated itself. The second wife, Eleanor, married Charles Hartwell in the early 1900s. She was a well-educated woman from a respected family with no history of mental illness. Yet, within 2 years of moving into the Hartwell estate, Eleanor developed an unshakable paranoia. She would accuse the servants of conspiring against her, insisting that they were slipping poison into her tea. She refused to sleep in her bedroom, claiming someone was standing over her at night. Eventually, her outbursts became so severe that she too was sent away for treatment and never returned. By the time the third tragedy unfolded in the mid-20th century, whispers of a curse began to take root. This time it was Lillian, a lively and charismatic woman who married William Hartwell. She was known for hosting grand gatherings, bringing warmth and laughter into the cold, echoing halls of the estate. But soon, Lillian began to show signs of delusion. She claimed that the mirrors in the house reflected scenes from another time, and that the reflections moved even when she was still. Guests noticed her staring into the glass for long periods, her lips moving in silent conversation with someone unseen. When she smashed an ornate mirror in a fit of terror, screaming that a pale hand had reached out toward her, the family could no longer conceal the truth. Lillian was institutionalized, her fate eerily mirroring those who had come before her. The fourth wife, Catherine, married in the 1970s, Catherine was pragmatic, grounded, and utterly skeptical of anything supernatural. She was aware of the rumors about the Hartwell wives, dismissing them as small-town superstition. For a while it seemed she might escape the pattern. But after the birth of her first child, Catherine's demeanor shifted. She became withdrawn, avoiding both her husband and the baby. She complained of a constant low whispering in her ear, one that grew louder when she tried to sleep. Friends noticed that she began sketching strange, intricate symbols over and over again, covering entire pages of her journals. These symbols bore an uncanny resemblance to markings found in old ledgers kept in the Hartwell library. Dating back to the 1700s, her decline was swift, and within months, she too was gone. Her absence explained by the family as a long-term rest cure. The most recent, and perhaps most public case, was that of Julia, the fifth wife, who married Thomas Hartwell in the late 1990s. Julia was a modern woman, outspoken, and unafraid to confront the family's history. She even spoke to journalists about the so-called Hartwell curse, making light of it in interviews. But her confidence crumbled after moving into the mansion. Neighbors reported hearing her screaming in the middle of the night, and she was seen wandering the estate grounds in a daze, barefoot and in her nightgown. Julia began claiming that she had seen all the previous wives inside the house, not as ghosts, but as if they were still alive and moving through the rooms. She described conversations with them in chilling detail, recounting things that no living person outside the Hartwell family could have known. Her mental state deteriorated so quickly that her husband was forced to seek help. Julia's breakdown was widely reported, and unlike the earlier wives, her case could not be quietly hidden away. By this point, the idea of a hereditary curse seemed unavoidable to the public. Outsiders speculated endlessly about the cause. Some believed it was a genetic predisposition to mental illness passed down through the Hartwell bloodline. affecting the women either through stress or some undiscovered medical condition. Others suspected environmental factors, pointing to the mansion itself, its oppressive atmosphere. The possibility of mold, or even tainted water as contributors to the madness. But there were also those who believed something far darker was at work, something intangible that clung to the Hartwell estate and preyed on anyone who dared to become part of the family. Paranormal investigators who tried to gain access to the property were turned away. And the Hartwell family remained fiercely private, refusing to address the matter publicly. Locals, however, continued to share their own unsettling stories. Strange lights in the windows long after the family was thought to be asleep. The sound of a woman weeping somewhere in the gardens, and fleeting glimpses of figures in outdated clothing moving through the upper floors. The repetition of tragedy across 5 different women, spanning more than a century, seemed too precise to be mere coincidence. Each case followed a similar arc: marriage into the Hartwell family, an initial period of apparent happiness, then a rapid descent into delusion, paranoia, and eventual removal from the public eye. The fact that all 5 women came from different regions, with no shared medical history, only deepened the mystery. Researchers who have studied the case note that the Hartwell mansion itself has a long and complex past, with sections of the building dating back to colonial times. Its labyrinthine layout, hidden rooms, and unexplored basements add to the sense that the house is more than just a backdrop to the wives' tragedies. It might be a central figure in them. Diaries from earlier Hartwells mentioned strange occurrences, including unexplained illnesses and vivid nightmares, long before the pattern of wives going insane was noticed. There are also cryptic references to a debt owed by the family, though what this debt entailed remains unclear. This legacy of suffering has become inseparable from the Hartwell name, making it a subject of morbid fascination for historians, journalists, and curiosity seekers alike. Some see it as a tragic series of unrelated misfortunes amplified by rumor, while others are convinced that the Hartwell wives were victims of something sinister, bound to repeat across generations without end. The Hartwell estate, a sprawling and imposing structure of weathered stone and creeping ivy, has long been the subject of quiet speculation among those who live in the small town nearby. At the heart of its unsettling reputation is the suffocating weight of generational secrets and the slow, corrosive effect of psychological torment that seems to seep into everyone who resides within its walls. For centuries, the Hartwell family projected an image of refinement and wealth, hosting lavish dinners and maintaining the appearance of genteel respectability. But behind closed doors, the family's life was ruled by strict codes of behavior, a rigid hierarchy, and an unspoken agreement that certain truths were never to be discussed. From the moment someone entered the Hartwell household, whether by birth or marriage, they became bound to this unyielding culture of silence. Servants were trained not to ask questions. Children were taught early that curiosity came with consequences, and anyone who broke the unspoken rules found themselves isolated. The house itself became a crucible for paranoia, its many shadowed hallways and locked rooms hiding not just heirlooms but memories, disputes, and tragedies that were never fully explained. Visitors often described the atmosphere as stifling, as though the very air was saturated with tension. Conversations at the dinner table were polite but hollow, heavy with words unsaid, while the glances exchanged between family members hinted at layers of meaning invisible to outsiders. For the women who married into the Hartwell family, this environment proved especially dangerous. They arrived as outsiders, unaware of the depth of the family's unspoken history, and soon found themselves surrounded by contradictions. Publicly, the Hartwells treated them with warmth and respect. But privately, subtle pressures began to wear them down: small criticisms, disguised as advice, questions about loyalty, and constant reminders of how they were expected to behave. It was not open cruelty, but a slow erosion of autonomy, a steady tightening of invisible chains. Family disputes were never aired, grievances were swallowed, and every uncomfortable truth was buried under layers of denial. There were stories of arguments that ended in eerie silence, of rooms sealed off after unexplained events, and of people disappearing from family photographs without acknowledgement. Over time, these conditions took a psychological toll. The wives, already under the strain of adapting to a new and insular world, found themselves second-guessing their own perceptions. When strange events occurred, objects moving from one place to another without explanation, the faint sound of footsteps in an empty corridor. Whispers just beyond hearing, they were told they were imagining things or overreacting. The effect was cumulative, a blend of isolation and self-doubt that blurred the line between reality and paranoia. In such an environment, even the most grounded individuals began to feel unmoored. The Hartwells had a talent for erasing inconvenient truths. Relatives who suffered from illness, scandal, or instability were spoken of in the past tense, even while still alive. Letters were burned, journals were locked away, and family records were altered. Over the decades, the estate became less of a home and more of a living archive of repressed memories, each generation adding its own layers of secrecy. Psychological torment became almost ritualized, not through outright abuse, but through the manipulation of perception and memory. Wives who asked too many questions were met with knowing smiles and vague reassurances that made them feel naive or foolish. If they attempted to confide in someone outside the family, their concerns were dismissed as misunderstandings or emotional overreactions. This pattern repeated itself with uncanny precision, trapping each new arrival in the same suffocating cycle. The weight of history in the Hartwell household was palpable. Old portraits lined the hallways, their subjects staring down with stern expressions, as if silently enforcing the family's code. Some of these ancestors had themselves lived through mysterious tragedies, sudden deaths, unexplained illnesses, and scandals that were never officially recorded. It was as if the family's past, riddled with unspoken pain, pressed forward into the present, exerting a constant, invisible pressure. The house seemed designed to magnify the effect. Its architecture, with its narrow hallways, enclosed courtyards, and an unsettling number of locked doors, fostered an atmosphere of claustrophobia. Even in daylight, shadows clung stubbornly to corners, and the faint smell of aged wood and dust seemed to linger no matter how often the rooms were cleaned. The wives often found themselves drawn to certain parts of the house, without knowing why, to statics filled with forgotten trunks, hidden passageways behind bookcases, or unused bedrooms, where the air felt inexplicably cold. In these spaces, they sometimes discovered remnants of the past. Faded letters hinting at family disputes, diary entries that ended abruptly, or personal belongings that suggested a sudden departure. Each discovery deepened their unease, yet speaking of it only led to subtle mockery or patronizing dismissal. This constant invalidation chipped away at their confidence until they no longer trusted their own thoughts. The children of the family grew up steeped in this culture of selective memory, learning from an early age which questions could be asked and which must never be voiced. They saw the slow unraveling of the wives who came into their home, and though they rarely spoke of it, they absorbed the unspoken message. Survival in the Hartwell household depended on silence and compliance. Over time, the line between deliberate cruelty and inherited behavior blurred. The torment inflicted on each generation, wives, was not necessarily the result of malicious intent. It was the byproduct of a family so deeply entrenched in secrecy that it no longer recognized the damage it caused. What had once been a strategy for protecting the family's reputation became a form of psychological imprisonment, perpetuated without question. Even those who sensed the harm felt powerless to change it, fearing that breaking the silence would unleash consequences they could not control. To outsiders, the Hartwell family remained an enigma. Their wealth and influence shielded them from scrutiny, and the polite charm they displayed in public concealed the undercurrents of fear and repression within the estate. But for those who lived there, the truth was unavoidable. The Hartwell name carried not just privilege but an inheritance of invisible wounds, passed down alongside the family heirlooms. It was this atmosphere dense with unspoken histories, controlled perceptions, and the slow grind of mental strain that seemed to push the Hartwell wives toward the same tragic fate. Each arrived with their own personality, dreams, and convictions, only to find themselves reshaped by the relentless psychological pressure of life within the estate. Bit by bit, they surrendered their independence, not through force, but through the gradual dismantling of their reality, until their thoughts were no longer entirely their own. For as long as anyone can remember, the Hartwell family has been haunted by rumors of a Kursan unseen, unspoken force tied to their lineage that has supposedly shaped the fates of those who married into it. The whispers are as old as the mansion itself, a sprawling and ancient structure that has stood on its isolated estate for centuries. Locals tell stories of strange occurrences that have followed the Hartwells through generations. Sudden misfortunes, unexplained illnesses, and a peculiar madness that has touched only the women who joined the family through marriage. The pattern is too distinct to ignore, with each tragedy echoing the last. As if the lives of these women were chapters in a story written long before they were born. The origin of the curse is the subject of speculation, and over the years countless theories have emerged. And some trace it back to the late 1700s, when Elias Hartwell, the family patriarch at the time, was said to have made a deal of some sorts, though whether it was with another man, an organization, or something far more sinister, no one agrees. One account claims Elias was involved in an inheritance dispute that ended in violence, the bloodshed staining not only the family's reputation, but its future. Another suggests he sought out forbidden knowledge, dabbling in rituals that promised wealth and influence in exchange for a debt that could never truly be paid. In either case, the legend insists that the women who married into the family would bear the cost, their minds unraveling as part of the bargain. Skeptics dismiss these tales as Gothic fantasy, but the details persist. Old letters hidden in the attic mention a binding that could not be broken, while an early family Bible, now locked away, contains passages in ink that has faded to brown, warning of consequences that would pass from wife to wife. Visitors to the estate sometimes claim to feel an inexplicable heaviness upon crossing the threshold, as though the air inside is denser, charged with something unseen. Some say the curse resides in the house itself, feeding on the energy of its inhabitants, while others believe it is tied to an object and heirloom kept hidden but never destroyed. The Hartwell mansion, with its labyrinth of rooms and creaking floors, has been the stage for countless moments that fueled the legend. Servants in the past spoke of hearing the wives speaking to unseen presences, sometimes in voices that did not sound like their own. Doors would open and close without cause, mirrors would crack in the night, and certain rooms would grow unbearably cold, even in the height of summer. Each wife arrived unaware of the full extent of these stories, though many had heard fragments of them whispered at social gatherings or in the marketplace. The family itself never confirmed or denied the rumors, maintaining a stony silence whenever the subject arose. But as the years went on, and each new wife met the same fate, her sanity dissolving in ways eerily similar to her predecessors, the curse became more than just a tale for fireside retellings. Among the townsfolk, it became accepted truth, a cautionary warning about the dangers of tying oneself to the Hartwell name. Paranormal researchers have taken an interest in the case, though few have been granted access to the estate, and even fewer have left with any conclusive evidence. One investigator who managed to spend a night there claimed to have recorded faint voices on tape, female voices repeating the same phrases over and over, though in no language he could identify. Another reported a persistent feeling of being watched, particularly in the east wing of the house, where several of the wives were said to have spent their final coherent days. These accounts only added fuel to the belief that whatever haunted the Hartwell family was still very much active, still claiming its due. Some versions of the legend suggest the curse is less a supernatural entity and more of a psychological inheritance, a legacy of fear, isolation and control passed down through generations. According to this theory, the wives' madness was not born of ghostly intervention, but of the oppressive and manipulative environment within the estate. Yet even those who believe this cannot explain why the same pattern has never afflicted the men of the family, nor why the decline of each wife seems to follow the same rapid and chilling trajectory, regardless of her background, health, or strength of character. There are also those who insist the curse has a more personal aspect than the spirits of the earlier wives, driven mad by their own suffering, linger in the house, and influence those who follow. Witnesses have described seeing women in period clothing standing in shadowed doorways or reflected in mirrors, only to vanish when approached. The sightings are so consistent that locals can describe the appearances of all 5 wives in detail, without ever having seen their portraits. Whether these apparitions are the restless dead or manifestations of the curse itself remains an unanswered question. The Hartwell family, for their part, has always denied the existence of any supernatural force, though their behavior sometimes tells a different story. Certain areas of the house remain locked year-round, and family members have been seen leaving offerings, small flowers, coins, or pieces of clothing in specific spots on the property. These quiet rituals are never explained to outsiders, but they are performed with a regularity that suggests they are more than mere tradition. If the curse exists, it appears to be unbreakable, for no wife has escaped it. The women's stories follow a grimly predictable arc. The early days of marriage filled with charm and promise. A brief period of settling into life at the estate, then the slow emergence of strange behaviors, night wanderings, whispered conversations with no one visible, irrational fears that grow into obsessions. From there, the decline is swift. Paranoia sets in, followed by vivid hallucinations and violent outbursts, until the family has no choice but to remove the wife from public view entirely. It is this inevitability, this complete lack of variation, that makes the curse so terrifying to those who believe in it. The possibility that it might be something inescapable woven into the very identity of the Hartwell name has led some to wonder if the family itself is complicit, knowingly carrying forward whatever bargain or wrong was committed so long ago. Each new marriage is seen as an invitation for the curse to continue, as though the family cannot or will not stop the pattern. For the people in the surrounding town, the curse is both a source of fear and fascination. Children grow up daring each other to run up to the estate gates, calling out the names of the 5 wives to see if anything stirs. Older generations keep their distance, muttering prayers if they happen to pass by. And yet, despite the dangers, the Hartwells continue to marry, the lure of their wealth and status drawing new brides into the mansion's shadow. Whether those women truly understand the risk before they say their vows is unknown, but once they cross the threshold of the Hartwell estate, the outcome has, for over a century, been the same.